Well, welcome to session 6A of the International Communal Studies Association 2024 Digital Conference. Um, just a couple of things that we need to know. Because this is a digital conference, the only way we can get to know each other is to be able to see each other and know who we are. And there are two very simple things you can do. One is to switch on your video camera and then we can see you, and that's wonderful. And you can also change your name or put out your name that you want to be called. And you can do that also very easily um, uh, on Zoom. So welcome to this session. I want to welcome Hugh Perry, um, who is going to lead the session. I'm hoping that everybody has pens and paper. And if they don't have pens and paper readily available, run now and get. Yes, Marta and I are showing what paper is like, and I will show you what a pencil is like. And so now we are equipped with the equipment. Hugh, I would like to hand over to you to introduce the session.
All right. Well, welcome. I've been looking forward to this since September when we first started communicating on this. Yeah, so right now you might hear a little bit of bangs in the background because I'm in Mexico and they're celebrating the blessings of the boat, the fishing village next door, and they have a whole week session of saying prayers and projecting protection for the fishermen. Yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a brief introduction of myself and how this four-color system actually was born. And then I'm going to take you through 3 exercises that we'll all participate together. And we'll leave some time at that point to for comments. Then we'll get back into it with a bit more explanation. And then at the end, we'll have questions and answers. Okay. So I was a single child and born into older parents, and I believe that gave me a passion for wanting to be with larger families, because when I go visit my cousins, I absolutely loved the chaos of, where there was 8 and 9 kids, and just absolutely thought that was like what I needed and what I wanted. And so then when I became an adult, there was communities started to build up around in my neighborhood, and I sought them out with passion. However, they were so remote and locked in the wilderness of Canada that I was unable to find them. So I ended up having to start our own community. And the group of us, we were actually uh, environmental activists, and at the time, and when the Eastern religion started showing us that we had to actually solve problems in ourselves, otherwise we were going to just repeat the same things that were going on in the outside world. So we sought out some way of doing that, and the only thing that was available to us at that time was metaphysics in our area. And so we started to study the metaphysical patterns and take workshops. And at the end of the workshops, we would say, wow, isn't it a shame that we have to actually leave and go back to a system that doesn't seem to be evolving in any way? Wouldn't it be great if we could just actually all live together? And for us, that was a concept that we had no idea that even existed other than the communes that we had encountered a few years earlier. And so my wife and I decided to sell our house and put the money towards building some accommodations. We wanted to build something for about 24 people. And of course, we didn't have enough money to complete the project, but it didn't matter. The motivation was there, and we started constructing. And within a few months, 4 other couples sold their homes and joined in, and we started to build, really building. And within a year, we had 200 people, including 30 children, join us. And we couldn't build fast enough. So we had to buy properties. We bought a school that had about 12 classrooms. We converted those into accommodation. We bought an old convent. And soon we had 4 accommodation with people basically scattered across Canada. So you can imagine the fact that we jumped into this without any plan, and trying to keep us all in one mind was a huge challenge. And so one of the guys actually came up with he called it a clock, where he had divided up 12 different management positions. And at that time, the Rubik's Cube came out. And so as soon as, and it had the 4 colors on the Rubik's Cube. So he said, okay, great. What can we do with that? And at the same time, we had some elderly psychics in our community. And they were already teaching us about auras. And so they had, we had already been exploring with what the colors of an aura was associated to in terms of activities. So we combined those basic 4 colors into all the functions that we would need in our community. And that was the management system that we used throughout the whole system. And when we first started a community, you can imagine our meetings were very hectic and challenging. But with this system, there was less conflict occurring, and the meetings got shorter, and solutions seemed to come surface faster. And so it is that system that I'd like to share with you today. And in the years since that, I don't believe we appreciated the value of that 4-color system, which I now call full spectrum governance and management. So in the years since, I have been totally consumed with attempting to grasp what it was that made our community so successful and so enjoyable, and seeing some of the difficulties that other communities are experiencing and have experienced over the years. And now I feel it's time to share this system, and I've been doing it for the last few years. So that's an introduction to the basic system. I'm just going to read to you some of the benefits that will develop from this. It suits all forms of collaboration. It'll increase productivity, reduce conflict in your community, helps resolve conflict, encourages reaching consensus. It assists individuals to discover their strongest abilities and maintains a healthy emotional environment. So we're going to do an exercise next, and then we'll get into kind of explaining how the system works. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my screen, and you can get your pieces of paper out, share the screen. Aha. So that's that's the cover thing. All right, so take a pen and one piece of paper, and I want you to do something like this. Put a number 1 at the top, draw a line down the middle, and one across the center. And red in the top left, yellow in the top right, and blue in the bottom. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read to you some words. And what I want you to do is I want you to capture your emotional response to the words. So in other words, your chart might look something like this. So as we go through the reds and the yellows, if you have a negative response, then you say, okay, well, don't bother putting anything down. If you don't have any feeling, well, either leave it blank. But we're trying to capture the emotional response, emotional positive response you have to the following items. So is everybody ready for that? Now, this exercise is called the creative expressions of how energy flows from a state of a vision into a manifest. And it's the entire creative process of how energy flows. So we're learning how to work with energy. Oh, sorry, that's not correct. We're learning how energy works as opposed to how to work with energy. So you ready? I think we are, right? Okay, so here we go. I'm going to do this fairly quickly because it's more of a right brain activity than a left brain. So red is the energy of energetic expression. So any kind of a response that those words, just put them in that little square. It is known as the visionary energy band. It is home to uncensored, joyous action. This is the inner world of the right brain. So how did that go? Can we move on to the yellow now? I don't think anybody has any questions, eh? Okay, you ready? Yellow. Yellow is the energy of orderly expression. It is known as the thinking energy band. It is home to methodology and structure. This is the outer world of the left brain. Let's move on to blue. Blue is the energy of manifested expression. It is known as the doing energy band. It is home to making things real and being hands-on. This is the outer world of the left brain. Okay, let's go to green. Green is the energy of reflective expression. It is known as a sensitive energy band. It is home to contemplation and observation. This is the inner world of the right brain. So now you can look at your sheet and you can be able to tell which one you was the strongest emotions. I'd like you to put a nice bold line around that square of the one that you found yourself to be a bit stronger in than the other. And this is pretty much what you were looking at. So before we go on to the next exercise, I just want to explain a little bit how this whole idea works. So what we found is that when it comes to creativity, there's a beginning and an end to a cycle. And the beginning starts with an unconscious sense of a need. It's either a need to change, or we consciously know that there's a need to change. It could, and an example of that would be, let's say that in your kitchen faucet on your sink was rusting. And every time you went to do the dishes, you kind of considered, well, we should change that faucet. But of course, it doesn't get changed. But we were under the impression that that faucet is also conveying to us a message. Change me, or soon I'm not going to work anymore. So there's this nature and our environment communicates to us in the same way that our body will communicate to us that there's a need for us to change a habit. Otherwise, we're going to have consequences. So in our community, there are these instances of these unconscious signals for us to make change. And within ourselves, we have this desire for new input, new feelings, new change. And so it's that unconscious desire or conscious desire that gets the cycle going. So normally when we are conscious of something that needs to be changed, we default to trying to think our way through the problem. And that only creates, you know, a new gadget with this that's very similar to the last one we created. We're looking for new inspiration, a new vision. And we found to be able to do that, you had to have some kind of energetic expression, something to introduce the new idea. And we're going to go into what some of that might be. And so that's why we call this first stage energetic expression. And there are people who are really, really, really well suited for that. They're the visionaries, you know. But once you have those ideas, then it's just energy. It's just like a puff of nothing that sits in our head. It's a vision of what could be. It doesn't have a methodology that comes with it. It's just an idea. And so what's the next stage? So that's just raw energy waiting to be manifest. And that energy needs to have a path for it to follow along. And that's where we get into orderly expression. We need to give it structure in order for it to become manifest. And then as it goes into the manifest stage, wow, then we have taken an idea that had no form and we gave it form. And now we can sit on it, we can tear it apart, we can send it emails, we can reconstruct it. And in a sense, for me, it's a miracle. I mean, be able to take an idea, a thought, and then transform it into something that has structure and has substance, it's creation itself, right? And the fourth part of that is the self-reflection. Looking at how well does the manifest actually match the vision? And what did we do that could be improved for the next time? And at that stage, then you're into the next cycle. And you just continue. So on your next piece of paper, I'd like you to do that again. I don't know where it went, but it's there. Anyhow, disappeared on me. So on your next piece of paper, do the same thing before. Put a number 2 on top, and a line down the middle, and across, and like that. Red, yellow, green. And so now what I'd like to share with you is, how do we sense these energies? I mean, we already are living a pattern of creating giving structure, manifesting, and reflecting. I mean, this is something we do automatically because it's like I say, it's how energy works. So we're already sensing these energies, and I'm going to take this new chart, and I'm going to read to you again some words, and record your response to the words as to how you feel that applies to you in terms of your own being. And this is basically how do we naturally sense these energies? All right, so we're ready to go for this? I think so. Okay, I see a head bobbing. Okay. So I'm gonna put my glasses on here. So red energies are sensed when we are laughing, celebrating, listening to music, making love, cheering loudly, playing games with others, dancing, joining in with ceremony, actively participating in anything. And then I threw this other one in here. It says barbecuing with friends. Well, I guess that could be anything. So that's an energetic expression. And what the red energies do is that they get the flow going so the inspiration can occur. All right, so let's look at the yellow energy. Yellow energies are sensed when we are learning, communicating, training, researching, managing, planning, governing, facilitating, designing, organizing our travel. I guess you can begin to see the contrast between the two. But let's move on to blue energy. Blue energies are sensed when we are gardening, when we're building, exploring, cooking, experiencing almost anything, cleaning, repairing, when we're in nature, when we're fishing, when we're working with our hands. So move on to green. Green energies are sensed when we are holding space, when we're meditating, connecting with others or nature, when we're sharing, we're in appreciation, observing, listening, philosophizing, teaching, providing space, contemplating. So take a look at your sheet and put a big bold circle around the outside of the one that's most prominent. Now, what happens when you put the two together? Is there an alignment at all? Is there a similarity? The first one is reflects your strongest unconscious response. That's number one. Number two captures your primary conscious means of interacting with those energies. So, which this is what I think I pretty well explained that. I've kind of lost the charts here. All right, that's what we're looking at. So that's what we're looking at right there. So I would like to just open this up to comments at this point before we go on. And I don't know how to do that.
If you unshare the screen, then everybody can see each other. And if let's see, if you look at the bottom here, there's a thing called reactions. And if anybody wants to say something, they could react by putting their hands up, or you can just wave like this. But Raven, I won't be able to see you wave because there is no camera on that one. And Anton Marks is actually only here in a virtual capacity. He's actually doing something else right now.
Yeah.
So a signal will open up
Okay.
for comments. So the floor is open.
Okay. So is anybody grasping where this is going at this point?
Marta, would you like to?
I didn't want to answer the question. I just wanted to share what happened with me, but
Oh,
I
you
don't
don't
know
want to.
what they're going towards.
Yeah. Well, what I'm trying to show is that there's creative process in everything we do, and there's a cycle to it, and it only moves in one direction. I mean, when we get a vision of something, an idea in our mind, then it can't manifest without us giving structure. And we're talking about energy. We're not talking about objects or physical objects here. We're talking about the energy of creation, of creating rather. So it's helpful to get to understand the four aspects so that we can identify where problems arise and where to look to resolve them. And we'll get into more of that as I start going through the explanation. And maybe I should do that right now. If there's anybody else wants to comment, I'll go back to sharing a screen.
I would like to make two comments actually. This reminds me, it's in the similar kind of thinking that in anthroposophy, there is a sequence which says you start by feeling, and then comes thinking, and then comes the will to act, to do something.
Perfect.
That's a similar kind of process.
Yeah.
I teach permaculture, and we also have a similar kind of thing that a design starts somewhere in the mind, which is not a physical, it's not a physical thing. It starts there. I could use the example of you want to build a little cabin. It starts off as an idea. You share it with people. It evolves, and that's a community thing. You then start doing stuff in the world, and you also have that creative process from something that doesn't exist in the world, exists in your mind, to something that exists in the world. And that was the same that you said, that this creativity is something which perhaps a Christian would say this is a divine thing, as in God created the world, if you want to use that analogy.
Well,
So
I really appreciate that summary. That was very accurate.
so this sounds like an exciting, it's a new roadmap to do that, to get to that same place.
I appreciate that. So I'm
So
going to go back to sharing screen here.
Right.
Okay, we're on.
Yep.
Okay. I just want to go back to here. So I'm going to zoom in on these guys. Basically repeating what was just said. So the energetic expressions, ideas don't just happen on their own. They are the result of a conscious desire for change or an unconscious need for change. So that's a premise that this is based on. Until then, ideas lay dormant, awaiting an energetic expression to unleash their creative potential. And for me, that's a very, very exciting concept because, you know, new ideas are hard to find. We keep coming up with new versions of the old idea. But when it comes to new ideas, they're actually visions or insights. And where they come from, it doesn't really matter. It's that if we have them, we feel good about it, and something amazing can result. The orderly expressions, where ideas become manifest, they need structure. And that structure provides a path for the energy to flow along. In other words, it needs direction and discipline. And the next exercise is we're going to go into activities, the energetic activities that match this 4-color system. And manifest expressions. Now the idea has structure. What was once just a thought now takes form. It can be sat on, walked around, driven, eaten, invested in, torn apart, and reconstructed. This is where we become creators. And this is what we're doing in the world. We're taking new ideas and transforming them into structures that people can benefit from. Now, the fourth one is something that is usually left out of the creative process for a number of reasons, because people want to move on to a new idea. It's particularly in business, this is one that's totally abandoned. The reflective expression. Our ideas are being made manifest, and now comes the need for a pause. This looks at how well the final product matches the original idea and where were the emotional hiccups during the process. So let's go to a new sheet, okay? Number 3. And this one is the realm of energetic activity. And we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to get you to highlight the areas that you have emotional responses to. And I think that's been pretty clear, so everybody gets that. Are you ready? Okay. Yes, thank you. Okay, the realm of energetic expressions. Energetic activities are in the motivational realm. Individuals are known as generators. They are home to the activists, to the artist, dancer, protester, musician, performers, actors, writers, warriors. Let's move on to yellow. Orderly activities are in the organizational realm. Individuals are known as thinkers. They are home to designers, leaders, enforcers, scientists, lawyers, researchers, financiers, politicians, programmers, administrators. All right. Blue. Manifested activities are in the actualizing realm. Individuals are known as doers. They are home to gardeners, builders, explorers, chefs, nurses, cleaners, machinists, naturalists, foresters, farmers. And I'm sure you can think of a few more to add to that list. Let's move on to green. Reflective activities are in the projector realm. Individuals are known as sensitives. They are home to facilitators, therapists, educators, negotiators, counselors, spiritualists, humanitarians, healers, philosophers, and theorists. And again, I'd like you to highlight the perimeter of what you feel was the strongest one. So in our community, we found that no matter how many people performed one of those functions, that we each showed, and the psychics were the ones that confirmed this to us, hints of that color. In other words, if you really loved doing administration, the intensity of yellow in your aura would be very strong. Whereas if somebody really didn't adapt to administration, they would still have a hint of yellow. So we concluded that the activities themselves have an energy of their own. And that energy of their own has a tendency to attract those who are best suited to it. In other words, it's almost like, again, there's a solution for every problem. So the solutions may already exist. And in this case, the activities have a sense of having an energy of their own. That was our conclusion, and I believe that to be true. And that's the basis of this whole full spectrum management. That individuals have a natural tendency towards certain things unconsciously and consciously. The two may not match, but unconsciously is more of the desire that maybe hasn't been nourished yet, or it has been. And the activity itself has an energy or a frequency of it. And when we can match the two, then the individual becomes more happy and pleased with their own productivity. And that's what we found in our community. We found that by putting someone, or not putting, but someone selecting something that they really, really felt comfortable with, whether or not they had the academic training in it, they would produce a better results than someone who had been trained in that field. And we had the opportunity to switch, to experiment from one structure to another, to explore those energies. Yeah. So we're moving on pretty good here. I'm going to show you one more slide, and then we're going to have a bit more of a discussion on it. And you don't need to do any more work, okay? So this is what you were just looking at here, this breakdown. Now, if you were to put the three sheets together, do you see a pattern happening? Would you agree with the results that you recorded? I mean, would you say that this is possibly true for yourself? Is there an area on here that you feel that perhaps you would like to explore? And if so, maybe you could just make a note of it. You know, you could be, you know, you could be studying law, but at the same time realize that somehow, boy, would I ever like to be able to learn to dance more, you know. So that's kind of a message to yourself to unleash another potential within yourself. So what I've done is I've been watching nature and decided that that I should plot what I observe, and this is what I've come up with. And this is how I see full spectrum energies manifesting in animals, plants, and society. We'll just zoom on this. So the red energy in animals, these energies manifest in the mating rituals. So it's that energeticness of mating. In plants, these energies manifest in the dormant energy that within the seed that is about to be burst forth. Again, that's very similar to the mating ritual of the sperm and the egg coming together. In human society, these energies manifest in the creation of ideas. So, and the yellow energies in the animal kingdom, these energies manifest in the gestation process. Because all the pieces now are coming together to produce something. In the plants, these energies manifest in the absorption of the ingredients necessary for life, light, water, air, soil, ingredients. And in human society, these energies manifest by giving structure to creation. The blue in the animal kingdom, these energies manifest in the birthing of new life. In plants, these energies manifest in bringing forth annual growth. In humans, these energies manifest by giving form to structure. I mean, pretty beautiful process, isn't it? In greens, the animals, these energies manifest in gathering for migration. There's a collectiveness there. In the plants, these energies manifest in the future potential within the seed that is waiting to be burst forth. And in humans, society, these energies manifest in the strength of community. Yeah, so how is this beneficial to communities? Well, I guess I'm going to have to ad-lib this one. When we can, I'm just going to go back to this slide here. So we found that each one had certain strengths. The people who were more the creators, the artists and the musicians and the performers and all that stuff, they were not that great at organizing themselves. And in some cases, they didn't even want to. An example of that is that I'm helping out an art association back home, and they're dealing with the government for grants. And the government is insisting that they take minutes of all their meetings. Okay, because that's, they're an orderly organization. The artists are saying, no way, we don't take minutes of meetings. Are you crazy? So there's obviously, you can see the contrast between the energetic people do not want to spend time organizing unnecessary things. They just say, well, we do it when it's necessary. We don't need to take minutes of meeting. The organizers, the energies of the organizers, we found that they like to think that they're creators, but they're not as good at it, and they struggle trying to make creations because they just seem to be repeating the same old thing that they created last year. And so by introducing the energetic people with the organizers was a fantastic combination. And when it came to the manifestors, well, they have a tendency, they have this, they're quite balanced within themselves on all these four, excepting maybe on the green aspects, because they like to be able to jump in from one project to another. They don't want to wait and pause. They just want to jump right into it. A good example of that in our community was that we're putting up a Quonset, quite a large Quonset, 60 feet long, and the blue people responsible for that kind of thing decided they wanted to do it in the wintertime. So when the portions arrived on site, a big snowstorm came and we got 3 feet of snow. And so for the rest of that winter, we were digging these forms out of the snow and having to shovel off the site and working with metal with cold hands. And, you know, if it would have been better to have taken a nice pause through the winter and done it in the spring. And that's just a good example of how people who are into manifesting don't want to wait around. They want to get to it. And so they have a sense to not want to take pauses. The reflective people are often looked at as not doing anything. But in actuality, you can't get along without them. I mean, every indigenous community has their own person who is actually keeping an eye out on the emotional well-being of the community, and that's what these people do. If there is conflict about to occur in some part of the community, they're the ones that are going to pick it up first. They're the ones that are going to approach those people and say, how are you doing? You know, how is it going? They're the ones who are going to give feedback to the organizers and say, look, we went a little bit astray over here. Let's correct that the next time. You know, so each community really, really needs to have at least 4 representatives, in my opinion, that has a natural ability towards their particular natural ability. There are 4 of them. I just want to go back to the yellows. One of the big problems we found with the organizers is that because they plan and organize, they have a tendency to make rules and want to force those rules. And we see this in our political system, where the energy of creation is totally blocked by the organizers and the laws that they make, restricting further creation and of activity. I have a few examples of that in my own story, because I was a designer in engineering and architecture, and as a young architect, I insisted that on site that everything was done exactly as designed. I didn't leave any room for any kind of alteration. And it was only maybe 20 years later that I began to realize that that was a wrong approach, but it was definitely the approach of our industry. And so I started to ask for their opinions. But doing so, they would say, well, maybe he doesn't know what he's doing. He's asking for help. But eventually I was able to convince them that I did value their opinion. And they would actually start coming to me with ideas. So as an organizer, we need to leave flexibility for the manifestors to inject their own creativity. And in a lot of communities I visited, you could feel the tension even before you walked in the door. And when you talked to some of the members, they echoed it, that they didn't understand why the enthusiasm had died. But when you start asking them simple things like, well, do you ever have a dance? They'd say, well, no, we haven't had a party in a long time. And dancing was just one example of how you could just free up energy. It certainly worked in our community. But anything that is energetic will free up the blockage. So in a sense, this chart works very similar to our chakras. We know that if there's a blockage in the chakras, the energy doesn't flow. We end up having problems with our health or reflective problems. And those problems don't go away until we free up the energy flow. And the same thing in community, or with this whole idea of creative, these four color system. And the organizers have a tendency to make too many rules and restrict the creativity down the line. Okay, so it's almost an hour now. I'm going to turn it over to questions and answers. So I'm going to close this off. Go back to full screen.
Right. If I could break in here and say that comments, questions, and stories are welcome. If you could introduce yourself, say where you're from and who you are, and the floor is open. You can use your reactions. You have a raised hand system, which looks good like that. And there's another one, which is an analog version of that is to do this. So you have both those options if you want to say something. So it's open to anybody who wants. Okay, I would like to kick off and say one thing relating this to community, that this is a really good example of how powerful community can be, and that within a community, if it's large enough, you would have a spectrum of all four manifestations, and it's the synergy between those that gets things done. So I think that's a really baseline to start from here, that relates this to the whole conference. But Marta, I see you have something to say, so I'll hand over to you.
Thank you. So I can just introduce myself first. My name is Marta and I'm joining from Norway. Who I am, well, I will define myself. Yeah, in Norway, I'm active with the Permaculture Association. I have a question for you, Hugh. I was just wondering, when you do these type of workshops, do you sometimes manage to gather an entire community, intentional community, a village, and then everyone sits down with 3 papers and does this? And how does that work when you're in person, similar to
Yeah,
what we did?
well, that's a good question. I have a package that I hand out, and it has all those charts in it, you know. And so that's, yes, we do it, and then they can take this home and review it because it has text in it as well. And then after that, I work with them to help them actually incorporate that into their community, because it's, you know, it takes time to be able to understand or accept the idea that we're not talking about things and projects as much as we are talking about the energy that goes into the projects and the energy that goes into the people who are performing them. And I think that's what differentiates this from a normal flow chart or a normal human resources kind of program which exists out there. Did I answer your question?
Yes, I think it's very interesting.
Yeah, no. So if anybody wants that, I can send them. Then we can mail it to them.
Okay, Raven, if you'd like to unmute yourself and say who you are and where you're from.
I'm Raven and I'm from China, and I do documentary. What I mainly film is different types of communities. And there is one big question. when talks about energies, especially when you talk about energies and spiritual related topics in Chinese communities, they tend to reject it very much. Because I think we are grow up in a culture where there is like no spiritual, how to say, you don't get to know this. It's always described as a not mainstream thing. So if I want to apply this workshop and talk to the communities about how these 4 different types of people, they function differently and supports the community, what would you suggest? How do I start this conversation with people who doesn't have this background of any knowledge about energy or say spiritual knowledges?
Well, I guess the closest thing I could compare that to is to talk about how the energy that supports all life. I don't think anybody can deny that there isn't something that is actually keeping the leaf of a tree active, and when something disappears and the leaf no longer is active. So I'm assuming that that's a given across the planet, but I think you're saying not necessarily. So that's a good question. Even in science now, they talk about frequencies a lot. So definitely, there's no need to introduce spirituality because that's just an interpretation of the energy that we've decided to explore. But I mean, the sun itself gives off energy, water replenishes us from its benefits, like it can be transformed into energy. So I say I don't have an answer to that question. I'll certainly have to, but I would enjoy exploring this further, and maybe we can come up with something with you
Okay.
directly.
I wonder if my knowledge of China is not very great. But there's one thing that I do know about a Chinese tradition, and I know that there is a concept called qi, which is energy, and that is something which is you can find that within human beings, and usually there's something called acupuncture, which works with that energy. And there is also an energy, a qi in the landscape. And there is feng shui is one of the ways that you work with that. And I think from the little I understand, this would be a way in to a Chinese or an Eastern way of thinking. I don't know how that you know more about China than me.
Actually, what you said was that tradition is losing, like among most of the people. People don't regard them as how to say, as good knowledge. They think it's outdated. They think it's not scientific. So when you try to establish ideas of how energies flow among a community, say facilitating, say the reflecting energy is very important. Sometimes it's very hard to communicate these ideas with them. They will tend to think we can figure out a way, a design, a structure, some rules to help this community grow. But if you're talking about those traditions we had, I think it's pretty far away from the reality now. So this is like a stock point for me.
Okay.
Can I
Yeah, Hugh,
have
do you
something?
have any response to that?
That's a good question because I want to introduce this to ethical companies. Ethical, I stress ethical. And I have to talk that language as well. So And it is a challenge, but I know that I can do it. And I've been working on it. It escapes my mind right now what those ideas are, but yeah, full spectrum management could be conveyed in a way that doesn't necessarily talk about energy. I mean, when I talk about sensing, people know that they have feelings and they respond accordingly to different situations. It is hard to imagine that people wouldn't consider that as a flow of energy between two things. And so that definitely is a challenge. But even in North America, I find that within the management of corporations, they are becoming more and more on board with this whole idea of frequencies and energy. But yeah, no, I would really appreciate if we could continue this conversation, or at least let you know when I actually have something that might work for you.
Thank you.
Marta, please.
I do wonder if, but I don't know now, I don't remember if you said it, but when you started having this framework, but did you notice in yourself development in which type of energy, comes, like which understanding you have of energy, and like where are you more, close to?
Yeah. Well, because of my background being in architecture and engineering, I fell right into being the orderly structure, the yellow structure. And so I thought that that's who I was. But as I've gotten older, I realized that that was like an outward expression of myself. And that inward, I'm actually much more green. So, and I always was. It's just that I had no external expression for it, because my being recognized as someone who was organizing, concealed because of my activities. It was blind to that inner thing. So in retrospect, I probably would have been a writer at a very young age instead of a designer, had I known this, or had I had this tool back in my 20s, I would have known more. So, and I think it does help on a personal level. And that's why I was asking people to compare their unconscious response to their conscious response, and then where they are now. Are they satisfied? Is that actually a reflection of who they are? Because when we align people in community to their natural instincts, then the community benefits by it, because this is where we get into solving diminishing conflict, and which I was going to go into if I still have some time. But yeah, it does.
Well, we have. I mean, we have lots of time. That's not a problem. I would like just to come back, Raven, to your point one more time, because I experienced that dilemma when you're trying to explain something sometimes in old-fashioned terms, where you're talking about spirit and souls and some people say, well, that's. But I would like to introduce two quite modern sciences. One is quantum physics, which is about 100 years old, and the other is ecology, which is actually, as a science, is only about half that age. But both of those are based on relationships and not on things. And so really what science seems to be doing now, it's changing and looking at what happens between things, which really is back to you, Hugh. What is happening between these four colors? That's actually where it's going on. What happens when you transit from being yellow to actually manifesting blue? And that's where the thing happens. It's the transition between, which is the same in quantum physics. They actually don't think that these atoms and protons actually exist. What they look at is the interaction between them. And in ecology, it's the same thing. To study a tree, interesting. Study a bird, interesting. But actually, it's really interesting to see what happens when the bird meets the tree. How do they interact with each other? And I think this is what I got from you, is that it's the interaction between these four poles, if you like. That's where things manifest themselves. That's where things they move from being a vision to being organized to actually existing in the world. And then you have that period when you celebrate and you pause and you say, right, wow, look what we've done. And so I think that you don't need to go back to older traditions. You can also look forward now into the science that is developing. But you mentioned, Hugh, that you
Okay.
wanted to go a bit further into this, and we do have 20 minutes if
Okay.
I'd love that to go deeper into this.
Okay. Well, that's well said. And it reminds me of something that I left out, is that no matter where you are in your primary energy response to these things, you have within yourself this four-color process of creativity. And when you're talking about the transition from, let's say, the organized structure, I hand you, say, okay, can you build this? I've already designed this. And then you have this whole ability to apply that whole creative organizational manifesto process yourself. And so that's that what you said about transition is what that reminded me of, is that we have our individual capacity within our primary natural attractions to these energy frequencies. And so that's where things like trust are built, consensus, it becomes easier, conflicts resolve themselves. When you have people who are actually performing something that they actually love. And I know this from being true to myself, or for myself, is that when I am turned on to what I'm doing, I don't have time to worry about what the next guy is doing or whether or not he's making his choices correctly, because I'm assuming in a community that we're all doing that. And so there's an element of trust. And instead of defaulting to distrust, there's more of a unity of trust. So the trust shoves out the distrust. And so that leads to, consensus. That consensus then switches from just straight consensus to emotional consensus. That the decision making is actually coming from the heart and not necessarily from the head. And so oftentimes in community, I think that we have a tendency to call our likes and dislikes our values. But there's a big difference between likes and dislikes and values. And we can get stuck in the dislikes and dislikes and standing very firm on them because we call them a value, but really it's not. It might be just something very firm and flexible. And possibly from our old programming that we've carried into communities. It has absolutely nothing to do with who we really are. And so when it comes to consensus, we found that there was less to discuss because everybody was seemed to be performing their function in a better way. So when you know that you can do it, you're doing the best job you possibly can, then you kind of know that everybody else is doing the same thing. And so it went from, instead of debating our way into agreement, we were listening to our way into agreement. And consensus process went quite much quicker. And when it came to conflict resolution, We found that when people were dissatisfied with things in the community, it generally was that they were dissatisfied with themselves, that they were not happy in the process that they were being asked to do, because maybe they peer pressure had got them to take on a role that they weren't well suited for. And so this full spectrum governance or management helps resolve that, because hopefully they would be in the position that they are best suited for, and therefore wouldn't get upset as easily about things that don't really matter. Don't get upset about the small stuff. So those are three very important benefits that I see to this system, as well as from a management point of view. Like I watched the program, or the one with Danielle, about Jen, and looking at his flow charts of how trying to organize all these different departments and in different countries all over the world. And I thought, wow, could they ever benefit from this 4-color system? Because in that case, every segment would be a reflection of their own 4-color system of management. And so it would almost seem like you'd have only 4 parts that are basically duplicate. It's almost like the cells of the body. Each cell doesn't have to have, is not separate. It is separate, but it's also connected. So outside of answering questions, I really don't have much to add other than to summarize. And I could do that. What time is it? Oh, yeah.
Go for it. Yep.
Okay. All right. You guys don't mind if I read this to you? Okay. Full spectrum model demonstrates how individuals and groups can align with the natural flow of life-giving energy rather than working against that flow. This is achieved by combining the primary energies of individuals with the similar energies of specific activities. The model promotes individual growth, facilitates a transition from a rigid society to continuously evolving society. It encourages members to be the best version of themselves. It builds trust, minimizes conflict, establishes emotional consensus, gets the jobs done with grace, aligns inner abilities with outer abilities. As the full spectrum government model becomes established, participants will naturally identify the source of problems and know where to look for solutions. And as a final point, creativity is energy vibrating to 4 specific frequencies. And problems develop from restriction to that flow. And if anybody wants to go further on this, they can contact me. Yeah, we can set something up. I really would like to see communities at least explore this idea. And I'm willing to help them in any way I can.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Hugh. That was great. One thing you could do, if you write in chat a contact for you, an email or a website, that would be really good, because this is all being recorded, and then people can come back in at a later date and access and have access to you.
Can I push chat now, or do I do it later?
Wait, no, it's okay. we're good at multitasking these days. I just want to say thank you. I wondered if if anybody else wants to add anything before I wind things up. The floor is open. You have to unmute if you want to say something. So while Hugh is finishing that off, I want to say a big thank you. I made a lot of notes. I teach, so I'm always looking for new material and new insights, and I got that. Thank you everybody for joining, and I wish you a good break. And we are back in here for the next session at actually about 27 minutes.
Okay. Thank
Okay,
you, everybody.
enjoy the break, everybody.
I appreciate your
Joining us.
participation.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.